tonight, basically what we're just really going to cover is your guys' role as a Scourge in terms of what the commander does, what the commander calls, and everything of that nature. So, end of the day, Nova says one thing, I say another thing. We still both mean the same thing. You know, Nova you might say what, shades? You know, you do your shade calls, yeah, and we say smalls. Same thing. It's your small burst, it's your shade burst, it's whatever. So, end of the day, your guys' role as a Scourge is to provide AoE pressure in addition to tight, single-person spike damage. You're a big source of corruption, you're a big source of AoE pressure that can relieve any kind of big pushes that are either we may do or we may get pushed on. In the basics of the Scourge, your ideal comp is to run Berserker stats. Now, you don't have to run Berserker stats. You can run a little bit of Marauders if you're a bit more uncomfortable. You can even slot in a little bit of Cavalier stuff if you're really, really uncomfortable or new to playing Scourge. The idea, though, is that eventually you shift everything over to full Zerk. It's the most amount of damage, it's the most amount of spike, it's just the best for anything and everyone.
It's the best for doing the job you're supposed to be doing.
Yep. Ideally, you also want to run Scholar runes, but if you can't afford Scholar, cheaper options involve being pack runes. Cheaper options are Strength. Just look at cheaper options that give you a damage buff in addition to that. Weapon sets are going to be Scepter Dagger, Axe Focus. We were just talking about the Scepter Dagger, not Scepter Focus, not Scepter Torch. It's Scepter Dagger, Axe Focus. And the reason why is the Scepter Dagger both go really well with AoE pressure, and then the Axe Focus goes into single target pressure. The last couple things is the build. In regards to the build, it's pretty universal. You're going to be running Spite, Curses, Scourge. The reason why for Spite is a lot of that heavy pressure goes into damage. Scepter does a lot. The Curses line does a lot for your Scepter, which helps in turn remove boons. And Scourge is just really powerful right now in today's day and age meta. So, with utility uses, essentially your focus is going to be on your two main things, Well of Corruption, Well of Suffering. These are your two main, like when we're going into a bubble, when we're going into a big spike damage, these are the two things that you're going to be using full stop. Ideally,
what gives Wells its name. Like
yeah. I mean, even Chronomancers are dropping their Wells. Like, this is the whole reason that we've got all of this AoE big spike damage. What you'll want to do is when the commander makes the call, makes the ready to push, Nova, if you're I think typically you drop your Wells in your bubbles as well.
Normally, yeah. I usually pop them with the Wells. I don't waste it on the shades.
Yeah. So in a bubble, this is our biggest damage. This is where we're going to be doing all. You're just dumping everything in order to confirm those downs. You'll want to lead with Well of Corruption because it's a longer cooldown. At 40 seconds, over the 30 seconds of Well of Suffering. Your other utility is a little bit more of a free utility, but it should be Trail of Anguish.
I'm gonna pause you there.
Sure.
You use the Well of Corruption first because you want to corrupt the boons first.
yes.
Yeah, you want to corrupt the boons first, but it's also a longer cooldown. Because you just kind of want to try to make sure that both your Wells are off cooldown as quickly as possible. And that extra second, 2 seconds, Nova and I can tell you is the difference between having a really good burst ready for the next one, or getting completely run over because your Well of Corruption was on. But yes, you're right. Corruption to remove the last little bit of boons that people have when they're in the middle of a bubble. And for the most part, you want to make sure that you're continuously getting life force, because the shade spikes, you're always going to be having shade spikes every 10 seconds. Ideally every 10 seconds. So if you don't have life force to drop more shades, to drop more of your your spike, then you don't have anything. So
It's
you're,
more like every 15 because that's the cooldown of shades, but with alacrity possibly. Yeah.
yeah, ideally you're going to be using your F2 only in your small shade spikes for that corruption. You could get an F3 if you really want to, but most of the time you're saving that F3 for a melee push. The last two are your heal skill and your elite skill. We're going to start with the elite skill first, Sand Flare. Really, this is going to be used as an AoE barrier application for any and all of your allies. When we're going into a melee push, you want to make sure everyone's as topped up as possible. So you're going to be putting on, as we're pushing in, as we're going in for that big well spike, we're going to be dropping our Sand Flare on all of our allies. That way they are able to absorb. Even with us being in full Zerker, full Marauder, we're putting on 5,000 extra hit points to our allies. That's really important.
So question.
Sure.
So I read on Meta Battle that spectral armor is usually slotted for people who have trouble gaining life force. Is that also recommended or not?
You shouldn't have trouble gaining life force, especially the main thing here is that you're running Necro. A lot of people are going to be dying. You're going to be getting a lot of life force anyway, but also
your weapon skills deal life force. So.
Yep. But it also falls back into the traits, into all the stuff that we've been talking about. Nourishing Ashes, you get 3% life force every time you corrupt a boon. You're corrupting boons nonstop. Now, into Ghastly Breach. Ghastly Breach is usually where, at least for me, I call Ghastly Breach on top of Downs. I don't know, Nova, do you do the same thing? Do you do it differently?
Usually Breach, it's either when I engage or if they engage to us.
Yeah.
In a bubble would be like kind of ideal too.
Yeah. So there's two different ways to play it. Is you're getting engaged on and you need to put a lot of AoE pressure. Breaches are definitely a great place to put it. The other thing is if they're sitting on a ton of people down, dead, maybe they're even hard resing, you drop your breaches on top, and all of a sudden you've got even more downs just because they're sitting in a lot of damage. In terms of it, listen to your commander, but also kind of play with it. Like if you guys are getting pushed a lot and you're finding that there's a lot of pressure being put on in melee, Ghastly Breach is definitely a great option. If you guys aren't getting pressed into melee as much, use it a little bit more offensively. It's a great option in terms of both offensive and defensive.
Yeah, I see it as a good counter, especially if they're, if it's like a melee pretty heavy group, or they kind of want a one push or whatever.
Yeah, something like SF or even Grub, for example.
Yeah.
Basically, anytime that they're going to be stood on top of you for more than 2 seconds, it's a good ability.
Yeah. So, shifting now to the left of your health pool, the weapon skills. We kind of touched about this a little bit, but now we're going to go really deep into it. Weapon skills, you're going to be leading with Scepter Dagger. Every single time we're in a fight, we're doing range trades, we're doing our Shades Bombs, whatever, you're always going to be into Scepter Dagger until we push into melee. Once we push into melee, then we'll be going into our Axe Focus. The ideal rotation of your Scepter Dagger is that you're going to use Scepter 3 first and foremost. Scepter 3 is AoE, Boon Corrupt, it just rips everything, gives you a ton of life force, and maybe even tops up if you're low. Moving from there, you go Scepter 2 and Dagger 5. Those are the big AoE skills that you're going to drop. I'll get to your question in 1 second. Or
it's not a question, just
yeah, no, it is a statement. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, try to find someone who's either down or doesn't have Aegis, because Scepter 3 is capable of getting blocked. So something that has a huge potential immediately gets blocked. No bueno. Scepter 5, Scepter 2, great cripple. So if someone, you can definitely try to separate someone from their scrappers. You can even potentially get a scrapper or a support that's outside and just right into the middle of your nuke. And then Enfeebling Blood, the biggest thing here is to focus on the Boon Corruption. Again, you're taking Dagger 5, you're hitting them with an AoE, so it's a lot harder for them to kind of miss that AoE. When we move into melee, you're in your Axe Focus setup. Immediately you're starting with your Axe 3, Boon Corrupts, AoEs, and then you move into what is by far the most powerful single burst combo in the game at this moment, is your Scepter 5, Axe 2,
Focus 5, you mean?
Focus 5, yeah, thank you, Focus 5. Focus 5, Axe 2 combo. Essentially what you're looking for here is you're looking for a player that is squishy. You're looking for a Scourge, you're looking for a Revenant, you're looking for, by Lord, if they're running Rangers, you're looking for a Ranger. You're looking for someone that you can hit hard, remove all the boons that they have, and then you're gonna axe them up.
Yeah, no, but downs are another good one. Basically, you're trying to use the two abilities to either generate a down or confirm a down, right?
Yeah,
That's generally what your goal is.
Those are your goals. Is you're either going to be finishing off a down with your Focus 5 Axe 2, or you're going to be generating something that is super low. Those are your priorities as a Scourge. Once you've done your AoE trade, now you're looking to find someone who is potentially going to be the person to go down. And this is where the big kind of focus comes in, is you as a player have to be heads up, because there is definitely going to be a lot going on. Commander's moving, he's asking you to drop wells, you also have to maybe drop shades, you gotta also do axe and all these other weapon skills. It sounds like a lot. You as a player have to know when to micromanage and be ready to do your things accordingly. You know, don't drop everything and just think, oh, I've done my job, time to do axe focus. No, it is priority stuff first. Do your wells, do your shades, and then move into your weapon skills. Because your utility skills are your biggest source of damage, your biggest source of corruptions. These are the things that are going to get you and the commander and everyone else on your team the downs that you guys are looking for.
Yeah, so
I
bringing up-
spam. Sorry.
sorry. No, go ahead, Epijay. I'll go
When
after.
we're doing small bombs, I usually spam Grasping Dead, because that's a 10-second cooldown, and I just add it on top of my shades.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing to do at all.
So
you can also throw Scepter 3 at people too, in that case.
speaking of shades, we push up to that, because that's...
Oh.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, okay, I was just gonna say, on the concept of like potential damage output and like your job right after you do your damage rotation, which just happens to provide the corrupts that you bring along with it. Your main job is still to stay alive, and like don't necessarily feel like you need to commit to doing your burst rotation on something. Like you can dodge roll out and cancel it, right? Like you don't have to sit there and do your full Axe 2 if you're about to get fucking cooked, you know what I mean? And the same thing with like, if the entire group has backed off and you're like, I still need to do my thing, like you don't. Like, it's much better that you stay alive and you stay with the group than it is that you get off, the extra 7k or something on somebody who's probably not going to die anyway. And then the other thing too is just talking to build off of what AJ just said about your using your priority skills, right? Your priority skills are the ones that do damage but also corrupt the enemy. That's increasing the potential damage output of the rest of the group. So you might not get the highest number on yourself if you have to prioritize using those skills over your other ones that actually do more damage, but you're increasing the overall damage output of the group like tenfold compared to what you would have otherwise, right?
In leading all to that, there's one final thing that makes Scourge kind of this powerhouse, and it is your shade skills. It is these little tiny things that you place all around, and all of a sudden you're ruining people's day. So in terms of, you've got one skill to summon, which is your F1, and then your 2 through 5, or if you bind it differently, whatever. Now, in terms of range trade, your small shades, essentially what you want to do is you want to focus on getting at least one shade down. When you guys are, when your commander's getting mesmer pulls, when you're doing hammer 3s, when you're doing your small range trade, this is where you're going to be dropping one shade, at least one shade, and getting your F2 off. F2 is the biggest thing. It's your Nefarious Fervor. That removes boons. and it also is just a great way to make sure that people don't have Aegis, people don't get stability, they don't have protection when they get pulled. It is the way to just make sure that this person is as weak as possible for the assault that they're about to receive. And then the other thing is the big bomb. So now we've gotten into, we've done the range trade, now we're getting into the bubbles, your wells are coming down, and then at this point what we're doing is we're using all of our skills off cooldown. Ideally, we summon 2 shades for this one, and then we go through the rotation starting at our Desert Shroud. Biggest one, barrier for the push, damage output is insane, and just overall does a lot of pressure for people who are being supported. And then from there, you're just going through the full F rotation downwards, so you're going F4, F3, F2. More barrier application with the F3, just making sure that people are always topped up. F2 is your boon rip, F4 is a fear, so if for some reason they have stability, that's stripping another stack of stability, potentially opening up for another CC to hit, whether it's Hammer 5, whether it's Thunderclap, whatever hits.
Last year.
Oh yeah, the all... Oh
Master
man,
Casino.
that was fun. But yeah, so, you know, just to kind of sum it all up, because I know it was a lot of talking, a lot of information, basics you want to go off of is work yourself to full Zerker eventually. If you're uncomfortable right now, start with some Marauder, start with some Cavalier, get comfortable playing the class, because end of the day, this is where you want to be. You want to be comfortable enough to be in full Zerker. Other notes, positioning, movement. Ideally, you want to be midline. You're a midliner. You don't have an insane range like a Weaver, like an Ellie, like a Revenant. You got to be midline in order to be able to get some stuff.
Like most, I mean, even still, like most of the DPS that we run with is like, even being midline or backline and stuff like that, like you're still within probably 150 to 200 units of the tag most of the time. You know what I mean?
From there, prioritization, utility skills first, shades, then weapon skills. Utilities, always, always, always utilities first. Because if you are not using utilities, you're holding on to them, you're doing everyone a disservice by holding on to them. Ideally, wells on top of warrior bubbles. For your elite will want to be either defensively or offensively, depending on what's going on. Assess the situation.
What?
Go ahead.
What do you want us to like say timers on? Specifically, just the wells.
Well
or
of
shapes
corruption.
too?
Well of corruption. Well of corruption. That is 40.
That's it.
Yep. And breach.
Yeah, I say Ghastly
Yep.
is the other one.
Well of corruption and breach.
Breach
Those are the
and
two.
well of corruption. That's
Yep.
it. You don't care about well of suffering and everything.
No, because well of suffering
will
will be
always be up before breach. Before
Exactly.
corruption is.
Yeah, and you're always using them together.
That is exactly the reason. You don't want to give me suffering, you want to give me corruption because corruption is the longer cooldown. Finally, shade placement. On range trade, you want to do at least 1. On big bombs, you want to do 2. Saint mentioned a few things. Just, you know, if we're doing mesmer pulls, be quick. You know, try to get a Scepter 3 off on the people that got pulled. Again, you're going to be sitting on Scepter Dagger most of the time, so try to get a Scepter 3, get a Scepter 2 in there. You know, make it easier for our Revenants who are doing a ton of spike to get those downs. Because it is amazing to watch 5 people get yanked in and just immediately dropped. Because we all did what we were supposed to do.
It's also worth noting, I was saying this last night when I was driving on any DPS class, when you're going for like smalls on pulls and things like that, you don't necessarily need to wait for the pull to go off. Just like throw your, like if you see a call for like pulling on marks or something like that, just start throwing your skills there. Because in all likelihood, by the time you the pull actually goes off, which is like generally like 2 to 2.5 seconds after it casts, 'cause there's some like internal cooldown shit on it. By that time that has gone off, you want all of your damage to actually be hitting as they're pulled in, not necessarily after they've been pulled in. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
but sometimes you get those instances where you're like, just kidding, no, don't do it, and then you're like, well, I just wasted it.
no,
And
of
it's
course,
such
but
a light
that's,
cooldown. That's the thing, though.
Yeah,
is-
that's why we call for smalls and not for wells on those things. So it's like, yeah, I wasted my cooldown, but it's like, cool, it's a 10-second cooldown. We can play around that. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
You know, you used your scepter, you whiffed your scepter. You used a shade summon. You've got 2 more. That's the whole thing. Is you've got a ton of stuff to play around with. That whiffing one, it's okay because it's 10 seconds. We disengage, we wait for it to recharge, regroup, whatever.
It's much better to have everyone in the group with their skill together than to have half the group not use their skills when we need them.
Anything that I might have missed for experienced players, Nova, you're more than free to jump in as well as far as commander stuff goes. You know, because you drive differently than I do. Everyone drives slightly differently. So if there's anything that you might have said, let me know.
Okay. No, you're on the right track that I am. As far as like pulls and stuff, what do you guys usually do? Do you do the scepter? Like if I'm pulling right here, are you guys scepter?
It should be
3
Scepter
then?
3 and 1 shade with an F2.
And 1 shade. Okay. Just the
You-
F1, right?
You
Yeah.
want to start with the shade. You want to F1, F2.
Which
3.
shade?
So summon your shade and then press your nefarious favor.
So I think there's a layered question to what Vesta just asked. So shade is literally just your F1 is where you make a shade. All the other F skills are like abilities that trigger both at the necromancer and at the shade that you summoned.
Do you use all of your sand shades?
No, not
No.
when you're
Just
doing
one?
a small.
Just one.
No, a bull. A
No.
bull. A big one.
You use
like,
that. You try to get at least 2, but if you can't get 2, at least 1.
It's 2 is ideal. If you can, at minimum, just put 1 down. That's more of the like subjective like timing. Like I'm not sure how this is gonna play out kind of thing. So it's much better to get again. It's sort of what I've been talking about before, where it's much better to get a suboptimal spike of damage than it is to get a optimal like burst that doesn't actually hit anybody. Right.
Yeah. So if Nova pulls
Yeah.
on arrow, basically your rotation should be he's pulling, we're summoning our shade. Once he pulls, you Scepter 3 F2. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I know a lot of times when people are teaching Scourge and just in general classes, most classes in a Zerg fight, a lot of the information is kind of like the range spikes and like the more prepared coordinated hits. If you guys get what I'm saying, like everyone can kind of plan out those.
Of course.
Where a lot of people fail is when it turns into a big cluster of pixels and people are just kind of on top of each other. And I think 2 really important things that kind of separate the good Scourges from the ones who are usually struggling is, first of all, always have a target. People definitely like underplay like how strong even just auto attacks are with weapons. Always have a target. Don't just plan on just trying to AoE every 2 seconds. Like AoE can kill people in clumps, but you're gonna get way more like if everyone coordinates a single target hit, especially if the commander's like single targeting someone, just a random dude in your party or in your squad, then that'll bring someone down with just like scepter hits or axe hits.
It's also worth noting that you can still AoE wherever the fuck you want while having a target selected for your single target skills.
Exactly. You can have axe 2 going off and still hit your shade skill. I mean, proc your shroud skills, and there's no issue with that. And secondly, one thing I've seen a lot of Scourges that were newer and they have a hard time adapting this is free camera. Free camera is like amazing for Scourge, and other classes I know it's not as important, but when you have free camera, you're able to walk around with the tag and you can throw shades on downs and you can do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
You can put pressure everywhere. So
For those of you, thank you, Puppet. Free camera, set it right there. For those of you that don't know, there is a free camera. I highly recommend using it. F11.
I love it. I love free camera a lot.
If you go into F11, go to your general options and scroll down to camera. It is right beneath dynamic HUD. There's a bunch of sliders and then some checkboxes. There's 2 things that you should have: enable camera teleportation and use free camera. Those 2 should be on at all times. It's going to be clunky at first, but you will get used to it. The other thing, as you get more comfortable with Scourge, bind about face. Free camera works with about face, and it is so gnarly.
So Guild Wars has this weird random thing where if you don't have that enabled, when you do any sort of teleport, you take a portal, you take like a jump in a distance that's not movement, your camera will not immediately jump to you, will just slowly pan to your target, which leads you to have this issue where like your camera is now lagging behind your character by some amount of degree.
Yeah.
So you want to
At least
enable
what
it
you-
then?
Yes, you want to enable it so you can catch up. It's kind of like a motion sickness prevention thing, but like I don't really see like motion sickness being a problem in Guild Wars 2. But yeah, free camera and the camera teleportation. I wouldn't worry too much about face too much. As long as you're using free camera adequately, a singular right click while whatever camera movement you're facing will immediately turn your character around. As you can see, like I'm just running back and forth in circles. That is just me moving my camera back and forth in order to turn.
Oh, okay. So I see. So the idea is while I'm running. Okay, sorry. I mostly pilot with my camera entirely with my mouse.
Yeah.
So the idea is while I'm
Yep.
running, I'm casting skills behind me.
Because you can do that.
Okay, I gotcha.
Revs use it too.
Yeah, and I have to use it. Well, Revs don't actually use it that much anymore because the main skill they used to use it for got nerfed. You have to be facing fucking Coalescence of Ruin now. But
yeah, literally, mostly like most skills in this game, like regardless, as long as it's not like a true projectile, you basically cast it behind you. That's how I play
Yeah.
like 85% of like Weavers. Like just, I don't have to actually like look at things. I can just like cast from behind me as I'm like running away from shit.
Cranking your field of view to maximum helps a lot as well.
Yes, and then moving, like adjust camera height to character. If you like take that off, it kind of helps fix as well.
Mhm.
Because you can get pretty far out. You kind of want to play if you're playing like Zerg type like this. Playing as far scrolled out as you can is best you can.
Walls and gentle slopes.
That's basically the practicum. If
Little
anyone really
murder.
had any more questions, definitely ask. Feel free. Get used to the class, please. This is, again, you're not meant to be top DPS. You're meant to be a way to get people to their bare minimum, which is no boons, vulnerable as shit, and ready to just blow the hell up.
Yeah, Banana Cat. No top DPS for you.
Okay.
It's not like you guys are gonna be able to do it anyways with me around.
As I say, but the thing is, Scourge is so powerful, oftentimes you are going to be top DPS, because this whole class is built around all of your damaging skills do all of the corrupt, so it's like, cool, I'm going to blow people up anyway.
What I'm
Plus
saying
off the
is,
wall.
fuck you specifically.
Yes.